Welcome to Frances Quilts, the site dedicated to the wonderful art of quilting, with a few other fun things thrown in as well. If you like what you see here, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe so that you can be notified of future videos. Hey guys, welcome back to Frances Quilts. Today we are up to borders and sashing on our 12 ways to quilt a Sawtooth star. We have done lots of different designs. We've quilted all 12 blocks, and now we're ready to think about all those bits and pieces that are between the blocks and around the edges. So today I'm going to give you a couple of ideas for sashing, and I'm going to give you 10 ideas for borders. These may be ideas that you want to use on another quilt. You sure can't use them all on one quilt, but just different ideas for things that you can do in borders, and I hope maybe that will be helpful to you. So let's go do a little bit of drawing first, and then I'll let you see just a little bit of the quilting, and then we'll come back and talk. We are now ready to start talking about sashing and borders. Initially, I had just done a 1/4 inch seam inside all of my sashing just to kind of hold the quilt top together as I was working on it. And honestly, I don't necessarily have to do anything more than that. I may add a little bit to it, but I also may just leave it the way it is. I have now covered my quilt with a cheap plastic shower curtain, and I'm going to draw on it with a wet erase pen. This is like a overhead projection. Remember when we used to have overhead projectors? This is the pen that you would use on that. It can be erased with water. So I'm going to draw some designs on here and just move to another section of the shower curtain when I run out of room. And then at the end I can just spritz the shower curtain with water and get all of the ink off of it. This is a great way to audition designs, particularly when you want to think about the quilt as a whole. So let's look right here in this area where I have this little sashing. I could come in and do something very intense. You know, I could have just tons and tons of little bitty stuff right here. I'm not sure that it really needs that, so I don't know that I want to do that. I may come in though and do a wishbone design. So I'm coming up and down like this, and I don't have to get real close. I could do something that's very open like that, and that might be okay for a design in this border. Again, I'm not sure I'm even going to put anything in there, but if I do, it's going to be something along those lines right there. All right, now let's talk about some ways we might quilt this border. The easiest thing to do, and I've used it many times, is just to have straight lines. So you could use a walking foot and just have random straight lines coming down like this. I would keep them at various distances apart so they're not all exactly the same. If you go for random, then that looks like the design looks fine. Even if it's not, it's still going to look okay. You could do this with a walking foot. You could do it with your ruler foot. Anything just to put some straight lines in here. And again, when you get to the corners, you would just turn that corner and keep going again. So just straight lines all the way through. Next, the same idea, but just using curvy lines. So again, you could use a walking foot, or you could use just free motion quilting, but just have a design coming down like this, just a gentle curve. And honestly, I wouldn't try to keep that curve exactly the same every time, because if you're going for symmetry, if you miss, it's going to show. If you're not going for symmetry, it's not going to matter if they're not all exactly the same distance apart. Again, this could be done with a walking foot. The only thing that you have to watch out for this is when you get to the corner. You need to be anticipating the corner so that when you get ready to turn that corner, let's say this was our corner right here, you're not here trying to turn the corner. You want to be in a bottom loop turning the corner. So that's the only thing really that you have to anticipate to do these simple curves. Now you might want to put a filler design. You might want to just fill this with wishbones. Again, they don't have to be little bitty like this. They can be spread out, and maybe that's what you want to do, is just to fill that area with a wishbone design. You also may want to make this area a little bit narrower, so you could quilt a line 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch away from this inside. I would also quilt another line over here. Now you notice that this is not straight. This outside edge that I have here is not straight, and I'm going to trim it up when I'm getting ready to bind it. So I want to make sure that I'm not going to draw a line in here that's going to be covered up by the binding, so you don't want it to get it too close in here. Probably what I would do would be to actually measure from this seam right here, measure over to here, however far, and put in a guideline so that I have that that quilting line going in the right place. Now, if you have made this smaller, again, it gives you some options for doing things. You can do these wishbones again. You could do a ribbon candy design, which is more like this. Very similar to a wishbone, but just going the opposite direction. So again, making that border a little bit smaller. If you wanted to, you could even make 2 or 3 lines. If you wanted it just to be a little narrow thing in the center, you could do, you know, several sets of lines. So you could have 2 or 3 here and 1 over here, and then have this little bitty border that you're working in. You can do lots of different things to change the shape and the size of this border. One thing that I have seen a lot, and I'm really anxious to try it, is coming along at some place in the border and just putting some random lines in. So it doesn't matter what pattern we're doing. If I have these sets of lines in through here, and maybe these go this direction, then I can do my design in that area right there. Again, it could be as simple as a meander of some sort. It could come down, you could come down here and do a flower in the center. Like this, and then come back over here, and another one here. So just again, something that makes that little border section smaller for you to work in. Also, if you're doing something like this that's fairly random, you don't have to worry if you don't end up in exactly the right spot when you get to the corner. It's random, so it's all going to look fine if everything is random. One of the designs that I was thinking about was putting triangles in here, like this, something along those lines. I probably would have to do a little bit of marking to do that, but my purpose in doing that is because we have all of these triangles over here. Remember, we've done a lot of triangle designs, so we could come in back into this triangle and put in our little sunshine thing that we did. You know, something like this, or you know, or we could come over here and just do a little thing here and have our kind of flower designs coming up. Again, we are dividing that border into something more than just this long stretch. Now, if I was doing something like this where I had these different designs in here or triangles in here, I would probably need to put something else in here. So maybe I just put some, you know, 2 or 3 straight lines in here. Just to fill in that area, but it would give it something a little different. It wouldn't be the same thing all the way around. One of the designs that I have seen that I thought was interesting was to come to the center of your border and draw 2 or more lines down here, maybe 1/4 of an inch apart, and then do loops. So you're just going to come around here and you're going to do loops on each side. So you've got loops here, and then come back up here, and you're going to have loops going this way as well. So that's kind of fun. I kind of like that as well. You could also add lines going in different directions. So if I put 3 or 4 lines out here, maybe 1 inch apart like this, and then maybe I come in here and I do another line. So I'm making that triangle again, but instead of putting something in here, I'm going to make more lines. So we're just going to have something like this, and then this would come out here, and I'd have more of these. There's going to be some backtracking if you're doing this, but that might be an idea for a border design that would look nice on this quilt. I really like this idea of splitting the border up into some smaller segments. So let's say I have split something like this. This might be a good place to do that loopy bubble meander that we had with some big bubbles in it, because it's not a huge area. Before we were looking at a whole border done with this, I think first of all you'd get so tired of doing it, but I also think it might just get a little monotonous in the quilt itself. But we could just fill that area in right there in between these lines that we've already put down. One of the ideas that I really liked was to put diamonds in here. So I'd need to do some marking beforehand, but I would want to put in a diamond shape in here like this, and maybe put 2 of them in. And then I could come in and do designs in these diamonds that I have. Again, maybe it's this. My pen's running out, sorry about that. Or maybe it's just a lot of dot to dots. You could come in here and just do dot, like that, and do 2 or 3 dots in here. Again, lots of ideas of things that you could do in that border. Well, I have been sick this week, and my dreams every night have been about quilting this border, so I figure it's time for me just to go ahead and quilt it and quit thinking about what I want to do and just get it done. So I have decided to do a series of different things. The first thing I have done is I'm going to have some triangles in here. I have drawn in some 90-degree triangles. I made this one equal to the middle of the quilt, so that's the middle sashing, and that's where that triangle is. It matches the same thing on the other side. So I've done these 3 triangles, and then I have added lines a certain number of inches up from each one of those, and just tried to make those consistent on both sides. I'm going to fill in my triangles with something. I'm going to add lines in here. I'm going to add filler design of some sort or something in here, and then more lines. And we're just going to see how it looks. You know, the whole thing about this quilt is to learn something new and to try some different things, and so that's what I'm going to do with this. I'm not going to make you watch all the filming because that's just going to be boring, but we'll just pick out a few little bits and pieces for you to see as we go along. So let's get going. One thing that became very important, because I'm not using a matching thread, is when I was doing these flower petals, it was very easy for me to just get a huge mess down here where all of them came together. So I found that I really had to maybe slow down a little bit and concentrate a little bit more, so that every time I was hitting back on that point. Let me show you what I'm talking about. When I'd start out from here and I'd start my petal, that was fine. But once I made this loop, I started concentrating and keeping my eye down here so that my needle would follow all the way down. Until I hit that point itself, and not somewhere else, but on the point itself. And then I need to concentrate coming back up here. I'm trying not to overlap that. There are a few that did, but I want to come up here and concentrate and bring it back down to that same point again. Down. And again. I found that it really did make a difference when I would actually just physically keep my eye on that point right there. It really made it easier to actually hit when I needed to. Now this is definitely what you don't want to happen when you're doing your quilting. So I'm going to be doing some ripping here for the next little bit. Actually, I wasn't particularly happy with that last flower design that I'd done, so I probably am just going to rip out this whole section in here and just redo that. So I'll be back in a little while. Let's just quickly look at what I decided to do in these borders. I decided to find the center of the quilt and to place a triangle right there, and then another triangle on either side. So that's kind of made up a little center panel that is in the middle of each of my borders. It consists of those 3 triangles and obviously with these flower type designs in there. I also decided to put some sections in here, and I made each of those sections the same design. It started with the 45-degree line, then I came over a specified distance and put another line in, then I came back 1/4 of an inch away from it. I went over that specified distance and put that in again. In the sections, the next 2 sections, I decided to do a filler design. So this first one I did this dancing bubble design. That's just the loopy meander with the bubbles, or with the loops all different sizes. So I have this section here as another divider, and then I just did a wishbone design in that last section. And then for the top, where it tied in with the other side, I decided just to put some straight line designs coming out here, just keeping those lines parallel. You can see here I have my section like I've done on the others right there. I also have that same section over here. You can see that. And then these lines are just spaced a relatively equal distance from each other. You'll notice that each one has a line in the center right here, and that just kind of gave me a little more direction as to making sure that my lines were all parallel. On the top and bottom border, I did the same thing, finding the center of the quilt and putting a triangle in there, and then adding 2 on each side and adding those flower designs. Again, you have the design here that is the separator. And since there wasn't as much room in this area as there was before, I just did 1 filler design there, and obviously chose my dancing bubbles again. Frankly, at this point I was tired, I was ready to be through with it, and that was the path of least resistance, so that's what I did. Well, I'm glad we're done. This has been a long week for me. I've had the flu. This was not the easiest day of quilting, and you know how things are. Sometimes life just gets in the way of the fun things that you want to do. But I'm glad we have this quilt finished. Come back next week and we will do a wrap up, and we'll have it all bound and ready to go. And you know what? I may end up putting some more quilting in the sashing. I haven't decided yet, but I can see it may need some. So we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining me. Remember, if you like what you've seen, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Please check out my website and daily blog at francisquilts.com, and I can be found on Facebook and Instagram at Francis Quilts. Thanks so much for joining me. Hope to see you again soon.